So I go and I get other girls. This is her talking. This is Guylaine, the awful Guylaine. She told me how she drove into the trailer parks in West Palm Beach. She told me what she looked for, and she told me that they were abused once. And I put her on the spot, and I said, who are you talking about? Who are these girls? And she said, they are nothing. They are trash. In 2019, I find out she was talking about children.
Children in an adult's world. Innocent girls exploited by powerful men and women. In particular, Jeffrey Epstein.
Mr. Epstein, how long have you been sexually attracted to underage minor females?
Objection, harassing, argumentative. Are you kidding?
Oh, I mean, I don't feel like I'm divulging any secrets here, right?
Move to strike.
In 2001, a then 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre was photographed at a birthday party for Naomi Campbell. Lost amongst the wealthy and well-known, she looks vulnerable and out of place. Just as she did when Prince Andrew was seen fondling her on Epstein's island.
She was really young, and I mean, she looked like a kid.
For the record, is there any way you could have had sex with that young woman or any young woman trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein in any of his residences?
No. And without putting too fine a point on it, if you're a man, it is a positive act to have sex with somebody. You have to take some sort of positive action. And so therefore, if you try to forget, it's very difficult to try and forget positive action. And I do not remember anything.
He removed her bathing suit top and then started grinding against her and grabbing her ass.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady.
I believe Virginia 100% with what she says. Here's where I weigh in on the story. That Virginia was the age she was is just a fact. Had she been 45, 65, if it's non-consensual and you're there in the capacity of a slave, if you're there without consenting to be there, the age goes out the window.
This is where I'm trying to understand the situation. Was Prince Andrew just a hapless fool? Or was he a reckless idiot who knew full well what he was doing?
Andrew has made horrible decisions. He's got horrible friends. And he's probably a bit of a dimwit. And none of that has helped him at all. But the greater good in Jeffrey's horrible, disgusting little world was the protection from what happened anyway, which was he wanted to continue being a pedophile for as long as he could. And people like Andrew in his pocket, supposedly that was a way to ensure it.
Jeffrey Epstein hid in plain sight. He was legitimized by the famous company he kept. The rich, the powerful, presidents and royals. A world where the normal rules didn't apply.
I honestly believe that they just get so used to being able to get whatever they want that then when they get finally exposed, their whole position is well, I don't need to tell anybody the truth.
What's also important about Steve Scully's evidence is that he's saying he saw other very famous people. One of those people was Bill Clinton.
Did Bill Clinton visit his close friend Jeffrey Epstein's island, Pedo Island?
I saw Bill Clinton on the island sitting at a desk with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, in all fairness to Mr. Clinton, I don't know that there were young girls there at the time, but he was definitely on the island with Jeffrey Epstein, and he still to this day is claiming that he's never been to the island.
Wow.
That's just a bold lie, you know?
And how did they get to Epstein's private island? On Epstein's private plane.
I know about this plane because in '97, she reveals to me in her words, what she says is, Jeffrey and I have everyone on tape. The plane is wired up for audio and video.
If any of these famous people were compromised by Jeffrey Epstein by being videotaped in the company of extremely young women having sex with them, they're goners. The moment that happened, Jeffrey Epstein would have had them in his pocket.
Whether Epstein secretly filmed the sex romps of his famous friends has long been rumoured. Did he set up hidden cameras in his New York home, his private jet, and on his Caribbean island?
Let's just come back to the videotaping for a moment. There's a sinister aspect to that, because if it's true, well, the implications are that powerful people may very well have been compromised by Epstein and Maxwell, aren't they?
Aren't they? Agreed.
We've been told by a former very close confidant of Ghislaine Maxwell that she videotaped everything. She and Jeffrey Epstein videotaped everything, particularly on the plane. Is it a possibility that they have compromising vision or audio of the prince that is at the heart of all of this?
That's a rumour. It may be that the famous or infamous photograph of Prince Andrew with the complainant and Ghislaine Maxwell was some part of a potential blackmail plot in which he kept evidence that might have protected him in the future. So it may be that Andrew is the naive victim of an Epstein blackmail plot.
We could not believe that Prince Andrew would be stupid enough to hang around with Jeffrey Epstein.
Any reasonable person would have run 1,000,000 miles from Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew didn't.
Well, obviously, that raises the question of why.
Do you know Virginia Roberts? So she's, again, who? Virginia Roberts. Can you spell it? Common spelling. Virginia, like the state. Can you spell it for me, please? Roberts.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
He removed her bathing suit top and then started grinding against her and grabbing her ass. They were kissing as well.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
He was a prince. He was like, he was famous. He's royalty. And it just stuck out in my mind. I grew up watching Disney, just like most little girls grow up watching Disney, and princesses and princes were the good people of the world. And he wasn't. He denies that it ever happened, and he's going to keep denying that it ever happened. But he knows the truth, and I know the truth.
Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein began after they were introduced by Ghislaine Maxwell. A friendship that continued even after Epstein was arrested, convicted, and spent time in jail for soliciting and procuring a minor for prostitution.
Any reasonable person would have run 1,000,000 miles from Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew didn't.
How did you first become friends? How did you meet?
Well, I met through his girlfriend back in 1999. But it would be a considerable stretch to say that he was a very, very close friend. But he had the most extraordinary ability to bring extraordinary people together.
One of the things that Andrew has done quite a lot is he's tried to dissociate himself from the notion of a close friendship with Epstein. Epstein had 13 phone numbers to contact the Duke. There are regular flight logs showing the movements of the prince on Epstein's private jet. At the very least, the prince has just been very stupid and naive, hasn't he?
Certainly. He is a naive person, and that is without doubt. But his connection with Epstein is really extraordinary, and more will come out because the security service were with him all the time. My contacts in the security service tell me that they had warned him time and again about Epstein. Well, obviously, that raises the question of just why he didn't take their advice.
It wasn't as if Prince Andrew didn't know. In 2008, his millionaire friend Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to procuring a girl under 18 for prostitution.
But what he'd done was horrific. He'd abused young women. Now, he'd done a sort of sweetheart deal, as it's known, to serve in a very, very open prison. He was allowed out to do business.
And is it 7 days a week that you're out on work release?
No, sir.
How many days a week are you out on work release?
6.
And of those 6 days, how many hours per day are you out on work release?
12.
We now know he was openly abusing girls even during that time.
Epstein served 13 months before being released on probation as a registered sex offender.
He threw a party to celebrate his release, and you were invited to that dinner as a guest of honour.
Well, I was there, so there was a dinner. I don't think it was quite as you might put it, but yeah, okay, I was there at a dinner, yeah.
At that stage, he knew irrefutably, he's admitted it, that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex criminal. He then goes and shares his house with him.
I was freelancing for many, many years in New York, and we had a tip-off that Prince Andrew was in town.
Annette Wetheridge was, at the time that Prince Andrew visited Jeffrey Epstein, one of the senior reporters for one of Fleet Street's then top tabloid newspapers. Annette was one of their attack dogs. She was dispatched as a New York correspondent to sit outside the Jeffrey Epstein mansion in Manhattan and to see what was happening.
We could not believe that Prince Andrew would be stupid enough to hang around with Jeffrey Epstein.
Now, I went there with the sole purpose of saying to him that because he had been convicted, it was inappropriate for us to be seen together.
I mean, the weirdest thing was, this is the biggest private residence in New York. I mean, who knows how many rooms are in there? There were women going in and out. It was a very bizarre 3 days. At some point, while I was there, out in the distance, walking from Central Park, looked like an old man and his carer coming down the road. This is when Prince Andrew was there. They went in there. It's like, who is that? We were parked quite a way down the road at that point. And when he came out and started walking towards us an hour and a half later, it was Woody Allen and his wife. And it's like, oh my God. I mean, the photographer and I were taking pictures. Jeffrey arrives at some point. He's got another girl with him.
How young were the women?
It was winter, they were wearing big coats. Hard to say, but there's a very grey area with, say, teenage girls. You could be 14, you could be 18. They were very young, to my mind.
There is video footage of Epstein accompanied by young girls, and you were there staying in his house, catching up with friends.
I mean, if they were, then I wasn't a party to any of that. I never saw them.
The following year, a video would emerge of Prince Andrew at Epstein's door, waving a young woman goodbye.
My job was to work out where all these women were going. They were coming and going. So I followed some of the other girls, the girls in the big, winter puffer jackets, and discovered that every single one of them was going to a building not far away, 10 minutes walk away, on 2nd Avenue. But there were 6 apartments there where he sort of stashed these girls. I was there for 3 days, and finally, Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein bizarrely went walkabout for 20 minutes in Central Park.
And we had an opportunity to go for a walk in the park, and that was the conversation, coincidentally, that was photographed, which was when I said to him, I said, look, because of what has happened, I don't think it is appropriate that we should remain in contact.
I know you can't answer this question, Annette, but I've got to ask it anyway. What the hell was going on?
What the hell was going on? Who knows? It was very strange. He was there hiding out. The thought being he'd gone to see Jeffrey Epstein, according to Prince Andrew, to end his friendship. Well, why'd you spend 3 or 4 days there, then? You could do that over lunch or maybe a telephone call.
Why couldn't he just write a letter, for heaven's sake?
Well, exactly.
I'm just trying to work this out, because you said you went to break up the relationship, and yet you stayed at that New York mansion several days. I'm wondering how long...
But I was doing a number of other things while I was there.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
For me, the most astonishing moment was the fact he just couldn't understand why even continuing any association with a known paedophile, a bloke who's actually gone to jail for sex trafficking, was totally inappropriate. This idea that somehow he needed to fly to New York to personally end the relationship, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
But Dan, he says it was the honourable and courageous thing to do.
I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do.
Well, if he feels that way, surely the honourable and courageous thing to do now is to fly back to New York and speak to the FBI. If he wanted to speak to Jeffrey Epstein face-to-face in New York, then why on earth does he not want to speak to the FBI face-to-face in New York?
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
A rather stupid, wealthy, titled man.
I wouldn't even think about allowing my children to get close to this man.
He knows the truth, and I know the truth.
I really, truly hope she asks for Windsor Castle. Boot him out.
It's curtains for Prince Andrew. Let there be no mistake. It's not outside the realm of possibility that a member of the royal family, Prince Andrew, could face criminal charges of having illegal criminal sex with underage girls as a result of this. It's that serious.
I saw the interview, the BBC interview with Andrew, and it was laughable, actually.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not.
He came across almost as a rather stupid, wealthy, titled man who couldn't quite understand the suffering of victims of sexual abuse.
Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender.
On one of defendant Epstein's birthdays, a friend of defendant Epstein sent him 3 12-year-old girls from France who spoke no English for defendant to sexually exploit and abuse. After doing so, they were sent back to France the next day. Isn't that true?
Once again, I'm going to move to strike. Irrelevant, argumentative, harassing.
I would like to answer that question. I really would. However, today, my attorneys have told me I have to assert my 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
One of the reasons I'm going to D.C. is to meet with her legal team for the Prince Andrew lawsuit that she has filed.
48 hours after speaking to Spotlight, Steve Scully made a hurried trip to Washington, D.C. Over 2 days behind closed doors, he gave sworn statements to Virginia Giuffre's legal team about what he witnessed on Epstein's island.
What Steve Scully does is provide first-hand evidence to suggest that Prince Andrew is lying. And this is where it's going to get interesting, because he is prepared to be voluntarily deposed, questioned under oath in a court of law. That's hugely significant. So, Jeffrey, if Scully survives the, as you would say, very aggressive, very intense, very tough depositions that are going to happen, often hours long, how significant is that kind of corroborative evidence in going to the proof of what Virginia Giuffre alleges?
Well, if it stands up after all that testing, then it becomes a fact. And those facts go into the case against Andrew, and they go in quite, you would have thought, effectively. So at the end of the day, he has a serious case to meet.
Steve Scully is now 72 and retired. In part, what he is doing now is making amends for what he wished he'd done 20 years ago.
And he's a father of daughters himself. He explains his motivations as being that he was at one stage compelled to ask himself, when a friend put this to him, how would you feel if this was one of your daughters?
I guess I really knew, but I never really thought about it until the pool man said, would you let your kids come over here? And I went, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even think about allowing my children to get close to this man.
And that was the turning point for him. That was where he realised that he had to do something about this and get off the island.
Oh man, I can't stay working with this guy anymore. And I quit the next day, actually.
In August 2019, while awaiting trial for sex trafficking, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his prison cell from apparent suicide. A year later, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested by the FBI.
Ghislaine Maxwell today pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking charges.
She stands accused of grooming young girls for Epstein. Her trial begins in 2 weeks. Prince Andrew steadfastly denies Virginia Giuffre's allegations. With his mother's money behind him, he and his legal team are fighting to have her case thrown out of the US courts.
I'm not in a position to know what she's trying to achieve, but I can tell you categorically, I don't remember meeting her at all. I do not remember a photograph being taken, and I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact whatever.
He's going to keep denying that it ever happened, but he knows the truth, and I know the truth.
She spoke about you. She said, I quote, "He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it."
And the answer is nothing.
I hope that Virginia gets what she wants from him. I hope, really, truly hope she asks for Windsor Castle. Boot him out, and she should move in. That would be wonderful, I think. Why not something like that?
It's going to be very, very difficult for the prince to dissociate himself from the accusation that he was knowingly involved with young girls in the company of Jeffrey Epstein. The evidence appears to be quite strong. Let's see if it survives cross-examination. But if it does, it's curtains for Prince Andrew.